Since our early childhood, we were told that drugs are bad, drugs aren't good for our health. But let me tell you, science proved that drugs have so many benefits for our health. Dear juries, ladies and gentlemen, dear opponents, I'm so glad to be here today with my team to say we are for legalizing drugs for medical reasons. And I will repeat it again, just for medical reasons. But before, let me tell you how hypocrite society is. They legalize alcohol, but they illegalize drugs. It's funny thing to legalize something harmful to our body and mental health, but illegalize something can be helpful. As the former USA President Obama said in an interview with the New Yorker magazine, as has been well documented, I smoked pot as a kid, and I view it as a bad habit. And a vice not very different from the cigarettes that I smoked as a young age up through a big chunk of my adult life. Obama said during the interview, I don't think it's more dangerous than alcohol. Drinking too much alcohol can quickly kill a person. The inability to metabolize alcohol as quickly as it consumes it can lead to a buildup of alcohol in the brain that shut down the areas necessary for survival, such as those involved with the heartbeat and respiration. You can die being drinking 5 minutes after you've been exposed to alcohol. That isn't going to happen with marijuana, said Robin Boller, a health scientist in the National Institute on Drug Abuse. The impact of marijuana is much subtler. In fact, some drugs aren't dangerous. Marijuana, weed, pot, Mary Jane, cannabis are different names but have the same meanings and benefits. Marijuana is effective in relieving nausea and vomiting. Studies have shown that pharmaceutical cannabis can decrease nausea caused by chemotherapy used to treat cancer and almost completely eliminate vomiting. Marijuana can relieve the spasticity of the muscles that is sometimes associated with multiple sclerosis and paralysis. Marijuana can help treat appetite loss associated with conditions such as HIV, AIDS, and certain types of cancers. Pot is safer than some other medication prescribed to treat the same symptoms. For example, it may be used instead of opiates. For pain management, opiates are highly addictive and are typically not recommended for long-term use in treating chronic pain. And let me tell you, the beginning of using this drug was in the 19th century in the United Kingdom, but it wasn't ended here. It was continued in several countries like Canada, USA, Belgium, Netherlands, Israel, etc. And as Bob Marley said, I do smoke, but I don't go through all this trouble. Just because I want my drug of choice legal, it's about personal freedom. We should have the right in this country to do what we want if we don't hurt anybody. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today we're talking about drugs. Yep, you heard me. Drugs that we all thought was bad, that one thing that we all thought was bad, and now we're questioning whether it's good or not. I mean, we're questioning anything at this point, right? I mean, has anyone told you if poison can heal? Because that's how I feel about this topic. Yeah, but without further ado, let's dive into it. You know the deal, guys. I'm not here to teach you anything. We start off by defining each and every keyword of the topic sentence. So yeah, let's do it. Drug dealing should be legalized for medical reasons. So we have drug. A drug is, by definition, any substance that when introduced to the human body, it alters one of its functionalities, either psychologically or physically. And as you guys can see already, we're talking about something that is by definition harmful. So why would you use something by definition harmful to cure people? Let's move on. Drug dealing. Drug dealing is any kind of transaction that includes drugs. Legalizing is removing all the legal prohibitions from an act. And finally, medical reasons. You know, guys, medicine, a bit of cocaine, a centiliter of heroin, a milligram of marijuana. You add the factor X from the Powerpuff Girls, mix, then boom, the COVID-19 vaccine. But seriously, guys, what the problem is when we talk about legalizing drugs for medical purposes, people will always go beyond that. And let me clarify that and break down that for you. For two reasons. The first reason is, you know how you always look for the smallest excuse to go out? Now you're like, oh no, don't worry, I'm just going to a friend's house, or how your dad is like, I'm just gonna bring milk, I'll be right back. And so that's what people would do. They would profit from the legalization of drug dealing for medical purposes to use it for other purposes. And the second reason is, if I told you cocaine can cure a headache, for example, you would use it the first time, then the second time, then the third time, then boom, you're an addict. And that's something significantly important, as the deputy leader of opposition would talk about it in details. And yeah, talking about cocaine, let's take as an example. You know, even though cocaine has medical uses which are like one medical use, it's still not legalized around the world. I mean, its dealing is legal medically in about, count with me, 1, 2, 3 countries in the world out of 195. And those countries are Canada, US, and Australia. And think again when I say they're illegal medically, because the only transaction that is legal is between the harvester and the lab that creates the substance, and the lab and the hospital. Let me repeat, the only transaction that is legal is between the harvester and the lab and the hospital. Let me repeat, okay, that was enough, right? And yeah, plus let me tell you, a study done by the University of Asheville proved that not only these 3 countries have a relatively high amount of cocaine dealing, but suspense, a relatively high amount of deaths caused by cocaine. And that's why we should draw a line. Come on guys, draw a line, you know, cocaine. Sniff, okay, sorry, that was a bad joke. Yeah, that's what's gonna fortify what I said, because people will always go beyond medical reasons, and that's why in no circumstances should drug be legalized, not even for medical reasons. And let me finish with a simple joke. Do you guys know what's the difference between legalizing drugs for medical reasons and a pencil? No? No clue? A pencil has a point, thank you.
First of all, I would like to ask you to slow down a little bit, because we weren't able to hear half of your intervention. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear member of the jury, dear opponents, good morning. I'm so glad to be here to defend this position. Drugs dealing should be legalized for medical reasons. Let me think. Well, yes, because after decades of prohibition, researchers is illuminating that new uses for some illegal drugs. In the 16th, drug scares swept the nation. In the 70s, the Controlled Substance Act was passed, banning or restricting the use for some of these drugs, due in part to the political climate of the time. For more than 40 years, researchers into this drug was prohibited. In a paper trusted source, former chair of the UK Advisory Council on the Misuse Drugs, David Nutt, called these drugs laws the worst case of scientific censorship since the Catholic Church banned the works of Copernicus and Galileo. Today, the Food and Drugs Administration, the FDA, is permitting study into many of these drugs that today were once banned. Researches are also occurring in other countries with more relaxed drugs policies than the United States. And scientists are finding that some illegal drugs have significant medicinal uses. Let's take heroin. A study at Hanover Medical School, opiate addict, usually people addicted to painkiller, were able to better kick their addiction after taking small doses of heroin. It's also commonly used in hospitalization pain management, particularly in palliative care. We also have ketamine, who's also known as Special K. This drug is commonly used as a horse tranquilizer. A 2012 studies found ketamine could in fact fight the symptoms of chronic depression.
We also have a study that claims that it aids the growth of pain synapses and neurological structures, which allow chemical signals to pass more easily and effectively through the nervous system, making the person more reactive to the world around them. Moreover, MDMA, this drug, is called by many names, including ecstasy. These drugs, which typically comes in small pills, produce a unique spike in energy that make those who take the drug feel warm and safe. That might be why studies shows it has potential to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's end with magic mushrooms, which contain a hallucinogen, which when consumed in small quantities give people vision. But study shows that magic mushrooms can be effective remedy against long-term cluster headache, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and even depression or anxiety. So yes, we can say if drugs are used in a reasonable way, in legal framework, drugs can be a solution for a lot of problems. Thank you.
Killers are cold-blooded murderers that, listen carefully, kill people. Pretty straightforward, right? So why is it when we combine the word pain and killer, we get the impression that it is beneficial? Painkillers are not illegal drugs. Yet what happened in the United States starting in the 1990s can only show us how dangerous legal drugs used for medicine can be, let alone illegal ones. Doctors at that time were under a lot of pressure from advocacy groups of the government to treat pain as this really serious issue because there were about 100 million suffering from chronic pain. And under this pressure, doctors turned to opioid painkillers, these powerful drugs that reduce pain. And one reason doctors turned to opioid painkillers is because they thought they were safer and less addictive than other painkillers. By 2012, physicians wrote about 259 prescriptions for opioid painkillers, enough to give a bottle of pills for every adult in the United States. Besides, here's a scary fact. In 2014, 47,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. They didn't die from illegal drugs. The main killer is not cocaine, meth, or heroin. Instead, totally legal opioids were the cause of the overdoses. Safer? I don't think so. In fact, Purdue Pharma, an opioid selling company, ended up paying hundreds of millions of dollars in fines for its false claims later on. And since opioid painkillers are so addictive, millions of patients got hooked on the drug. And as use proliferated, many patients overdosed. Here's where it gets really ugly. Doctors began pulling back these prescriptions, but what this ended up doing is that because these painkillers addicts were already using and addicted to opioids, is that they just went to another not so illegal drug, heroin. People who are addicted to painkillers are 40 times likely to be addicted to heroin. And that brings me to the second point, which is the getaway drug theory. A getaway drug is a habit-forming drug that, when consumed, gives way to harder, more dangerous drugs like alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine. And prescription drugs such as opioids are also getaway drugs for cocaine and heroin use. According to the getaway theory, getaway drugs that boost dopamine levels, which increases pleasure. And boosting dopamine levels during teenage years makes the brain release less dopamine during adulthood. This pushes people to seek harder drugs that cause more dramatic dopamine releases. The National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse found teens who use getaway drugs are 266 times more likely to develop a cocaine addiction than those who do not. And legalizing drugs
used for medical reasons is giving these people more chances to get addicted. Thank you.
Drugs aren't good for our health. Drugs are a menace to society. This is some myths and stereotypes that people get told. But let me tell you, the line between recreational drugs and doctor-approved drugs and doctor-approved medicine has never been clear-cut. In the past decade alone, there's been no shortage of studies looking into the potential medicinal benefits that several illegal drugs can offer. These drugs are largely illegal to prevent susceptible people from self-harm and drug abuse. And wide debate rages over legalization of various substances. Some researchers are looking into ways those substances could be harnessed for good. Below are 3 illegal drugs that are known or have been investigated for medical benefits. For example, treating hard-to-treat mental illness and chronic disorders. Cocaine, yes. The famous cocaine might be a well-known stimulant, but studies show this drug has long been used as a tropical anesthetic in the Andean Tribulon communities of the South American thanks to its numbing properties. Cocaine is also used as a treatment for irritable bowel disease and other intestinal dysfunctions. Cocaine is... yes.
POI.
Yes?
POI. Accepted? POI.
What? I refuse. Yes, I refuse.
Refuse?
Yes. Most famous, however, is cocaine's ability to elevate headache. It was originally an active ingredient in the beverage Coca-Cola, and they was using it in the delicious drink before the substance was made illegal. As known as acid, this synthetic hallucinogen provides similar psychedelic effects on the body as magic mushrooms. It usually comes in the form of blotting papers like the one above, which are consumed orally. However, during rehabilitations and finally adrenaline remains the drug of choice during cardiac resuscitation, we can confirm that drugs have a positive side, and it has an economic side too. Marijuana legalization boosts the economic. The marijuana industry, adult use and medical in the United States could exceed 24 billion in revenue by 2025. For every $1 spent in the marijuana industry, between $2.13 and $2.40 in economic activity is generated. Tourism, banking, food, real estate, construction, and transportation are a few of the industry that benefits from legal marijuana.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable audience, faculty members of the government, and members of the floor, good morning. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse and Health, most of the drugs that are used as medicine, such as heroin, cannabis, and crack, have many negative effects on the human's body because they contain hundreds of unknown active chemicals that are toxic and harmful to us. Now, let's talk about the #1 drug that is used for medical purposes, which is marijuana. In November 2012, according to the Institute for Behavior and Health, Colorado and Washington State passed ballot initiative legalizing marijuana, making the United States the first country in the world to legalize the commercial production, use, and sale of marijuana. As of January 2020, 12 other states have legalized it as well, adding it to alcohol and nicotine, and these components are actually the leading causes for many deaths and illnesses in the United States. The problem is not with the legalization of those drugs as much as it is with the fact that legal marijuana competes with the illegal one with a big disadvantage. Because legal marijuana is subjected to regulation to add to it, and taxes to add to its price. Worse yet, legal marijuana has shown remarkable innovation in products beyond anything done previously by the illegal marijuana, including the two main components of cannabis, which are the THC and the CBD. Now, this is the part where it gets exciting. A study by the Food and Drug Administration, also known as the FDA, had shown that these two elements have a lot of negative effects, such as brain cancer, heart attacks, change in the digestive system, blood pressure, and coordination problems. Adding to that, they're not even suitable for all ages. And according to the same source, in 2001, 9,000 people died from overdosing these two elements, but the number increased since then to reach 26,000 deaths in 2014. Now imagine what will happen when we will use an excessive dose of these two elements to make a medicine. Moving on to the long-term effects, and as the leader of the opposition already mentioned, one of the main pejorative effects of medical drugs is this after addiction, which means that the person who's taking those medicines will have a strong compulsion to drugs later, and yet he's not even conscious about it. And as the household survey reported, up to 40% of crimes, including murder and suicide, are due to the effect of drugs, mentally speaking. To get back to what the prime leader of the opposition said, legalizing drugs for medical purposes will lead to a total legalization of all drugs, and that will only contribute to skyrocket requirements according to the United Nations. Medicines or poisons? That's the right question we should ask. Thank you.
It would be better if you got your sources right and back up your arguments with statements that show logical reasoning of why you're against drug legalization. Instead of being a mindless sheep that thinks it's stupid because you live in a society where weed is taboo, and instead of doing your own research, you just follow societal norms, you're entitled to pure ignorance. You are not entitled to your opinion, you are entitled to your informed opinion. No one is entitled to be ignorant. Well, do you not see injustice when it's people suffering, sick, dying of cancer, whose only relief is a plant proven to ease pain? But that will mean handcuffs. That will mean being called a criminal. That will mean getting thrown behind bars. This ain't political, it's commonsensical. Millions in prison for something that's never killed a single individual. But you make deals with prescription drugs advocates, when every year more people die from prescriptions in their cabinets than heroin, terrorism, murder, and traffic accidents combined. Open your eyes and see the blood on the wall. These companies wouldn't care if the company was coming apart. They only care about how much it'll cost. Ain't been a disease cured in 60 years. Why? Because a patient's cured is a customer's lost. Now, I think it's time to get away from the pharmaceutical interests and forget about the stigma, forget the opinions of politicians, because collective ignorance doesn't mean wisdom. Because when the system is wrong, it's our duty to go against it. Every 6 seconds, a person dies from tobacco, and every 13, a person dies from alcohol. Guess how many people died in the last 10,000 years from weed? Actually, none. That's zero, nada, no chance to overdose, not one case in history. So don't be a coward, just legalize and control it. Take the power from the drug dealers who contaminate, sell it and own it. See, they love the laws the way they are because they make millions. As for the kids, yeah, I'd agree. Except it's easier for kids today to buy weed. Don't you think so? Well, it's quite surprising.
Your eye.
No. So, stop saying it's a gateway drug, something so strong that you can't break away from. Studies show it's non-addictive, and gateway theory is a lot of fiction. It's a contradiction. Then, how, if marijuana was a useless drug, then how do medical tests and evidence prove the opposite? It's proven to treat glaucoma, cancer, asthma, and other diseases. It could do so much if it was legal, but if it was legal, a lot of pharmaceutical drugs wouldn't be needed. So if weed became legal, they would lose a lot of profit. So is it really public health or is it special interest? Don't you think that those people are really worried about the kids, or are they really worried about the private businesses? Thank you.
Now, first of all, I want to talk to the Prime Minister about some arguments she said. In fact, she said that because alcohol and tobacco are actually legalized, we should do the same for illicit drugs, which is really wrong. The reasoning is actually so wrong, because it's not because something is harmful and legalized, we should legalize all things that are harmful. We should look the other way, which is if things that are harmful are legalized, we shouldn't legalize them. That's a good reasoning, and she did not do that. Now, talking to the member of the government who said that the line between medicinal drugs and recreational drugs is not clear, then that's exactly what my friend here is saying. He's saying that people don't understand the difference between the two. So if it is legalized, if illicit drugs are legalized, then that will be a catastrophe. And finally, the government whip who said we are mindless I want to just say that please choose your words wisely, because I think we're far from being mindless sheep. And if it wasn't for this debate, I would have actually responded more aggressively. Anyway, now to my intervention. I went interstellar. The world was like a speck from the other star. It was so beautiful. I can die now. Daniel, literally 3 days later, dies from an overdose. Even under medical supervision, there is no guarantee the patient won't get addicted to drugs. In fact, according to drugabuse.gov, 2.4 million people, 12 or older people, met criteria for dependence of prescription drugs. I saw my mother. She's still alive. I told her to stay. I begged her to stay, but she did not. Robert, depressed after his mother passed away, was treated with cannabis. Now he's addicted to it. Now I want to talk about cannabis because this seemingly harmless and benign drug actually is really harmful. Because according to the Pharmacy Times, after Colorado legalized it, for medicinal purposes by the way, marijuana-related traffic deaths increased by 48%. Is it a coincidence? I do not think so. One day I'll be a millionaire. Heck, even a billionaire. That day will come. It will certainly come. Ulrich is daydreaming about being rich while being high. Now, you see, having talked about money because, he wants to be a millionaire, I want to talk about economy. Because if the laws that prohibit drug use are actually omitted, then there will be a rise in consumption. And this rise will actually translate into higher public health spending as a result of drug overdoses, fetal deformities, and other drug use misadventures. Sorry. Now, my life is in danger. Do you need to tell me that? I do not think so. If it was as easy as me knowing that my life is in danger, I wouldn't be addicted right now. George, right now, is actually addicted to drugs. Drug is literally a strange word. It's D stands for Daniel's death. It's U stands for Ulrich. It's R stands for Robert, the ravaging of Robert's life. It's U stands for Ulrich's unproductivity, and it's G stands for the gambling that drugs do with George's life. Thank you.
Wait
it is less harmful than legal drugs like tobacco. So keeping it banned is a pure hypocrisy. In fact, cannabis has proven health benefits, as government whip said, treating glaucoma to preventing epilepsy. There are no health grounds to keep it illegal. Tobacco is more addictive than cocaine, but it's legal. Legalized pot could be properly regulated to ensure quality and safety, just like any other product. When it's sold illegally on the street, nobody controls what dangerous substance could be mixed with it. So it should be legalized. Thank you.
You know, guys, sometimes I think that my genius generates gravity because I somehow managed to predict what you guys were going to say. Let me tell you something. Did you know that, as you said, cocaine has a medical use, which is topical cocaine? It's an anesthetic used in surgeries. It's used to make a part of your body or your body sleep. And did you know the side effects of cocaine, including nausea, heartache? For heartache, for example, you would take Doliprane. For a fever, you would take Aspigic. That's just too much for your body. And let me tell you, you said that scientists found that there are some drugs that are used to cure HIV. Did you know that most cases of HIV are caused by cocaine? Are you trying to say that we should cure a disease that comes from a drug with a drug? Thank you.
Dear opponents, I'll make it quick since I have only 1 minute. I'm sorry, but I think you misunderstood the subject. We are defending the cause that drugs should be legalized for medical reasons and not that drugs should be legalized like that in the street. You wanna talk economy? This is my favorite subject. Let's talk economy. Do you know, dear opponent, that if drugs are legalized for medical reasons and that if it can cure diseases, the cost will be very high and it will bring the economy a big success and a big PIB high. Thank you.
People who use drugs might mistakenly believe a drug is helpful when it is not. This is especially true of addictive, mind-altering drugs like marijuana. A marijuana withdrawal syndrome occurs consisting of anxiety, depression, sleep and appetite disturbances, irritability, nausea, and restlessness. Dear Prime Minister, you mentioned earlier that marijuana helps treat nausea, right? But the thing is, often people using marijuana wrongly believe that the drug is helping them combat these symptoms without realizing that actually marijuana is the cause of these effects. Therefore, when a patient anecdotally reports a drug to have medicinal values, this must be followed by objective scientific studies. Thank you.
You know, if you really get down to the finer details, you find that the majority of illegal drug users are no lifelong offenders. They use a handful of times, and those who do have long stints of addiction want help but are afraid to get help because of the way they believe they will be perceived, or even face criminal punishment. It's been proven in many studies that drug offenders are often serving sentences far beyond the damage that they potentially did to anybody, and in many cases, just one short sentence can completely ruin them financially. The fact of the matter is that we are punishing the people who have a problem and addiction many times over in a substantially unfair ratio in comparison.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello again. In the following second, I just want to clarify 3 points. First of all, in this household, we do not take things personally. Secondly, and talking about drugs used for medical purposes, morphine is used to make patients feel nothing during surgeries, and yet it causes up to 72% of the death in surgeries, and this is according to the National Library of Medicine. Third of all, in the medical industry, doctors are actually addicted with a high rate to morphine, and yet they are the first people to be conscious about how dangerous and addictive it is. Now imagine what a simple person will do if he was exposed to morphine. Thank you.
There's a difference between addiction and use and abuse, and addiction to therapy. And you're less educated on the fact that weed in your body does not kill, alcohol does. There's a thing called alcohol poisoning. Alcohol and weed are both considered drugs. They both influence the mind, but alcohol kills more. Not by influence, but by poisoning. Weed does not do that. Meth can, crack can, but never weed. You could never die off of weed overdose. The research has been done on alcohol and marijuana, and alcohol is proven to cause so many medical problems, and there's little to no evidence of marijuana doing the same. Now, I have a question. Well, can you do drugs for evil? Yes. But can you also do drugs for good? Also, yes. Does this mean drugs should be illegal all the time? No. It means things should be changed so that proper enforcements can be enforced in our proper situation. And in the end, well, we all know that nothing is good for you. If you can control it, then you should be careful with any substance, whether it's drug or not. Thank you.
Now, I just want to talk to the government whip who said that there has never been a case of weed overdose. It's pretty logical actually, because you can't overdose weed. It's actually being consumed, inhaled. There's no overdose of weed. Something that there is actually, which you actually neglected and ignored on purpose, is that weed lead to early deaths. It's actually a scientifically proven fact, and I hopefully think that you actually didn't neglect it, just forgot about it. Now I want to talk about cough syrup. Cough syrup is a totally legal drug, both in Morocco and Nigeria. However, in Nigeria there was a problem, a really big problem. The fact is, in Nigeria, 3 million bottles of this cough syrup are consumed even today, every single day, which means that people get addicted to it, especially teens. So this cough syrup is a totally good example of what ruin legalization will bring to us. Kids, don't use drugs.